Hello, NAAIA community. Get ready to relive insightful discussions, gain fresh perspectives, and be inspired by the wealth of knowledge our community has to offer. Let's dive into another episode.
Good afternoon or good morning to everyone today. It is my name is Ashley White, and I am the Director of National Programs and Chief of Staff for NAAIA. It's my pleasure to welcome you to our Emerging Leader Roundtable. Just a couple of reminders as we begin our programming. As always, let us know where you are in the world today. In the chat, shout out your city, shout out your chapter. Engage with us as much as possible. Your moderators will be taking a look. The NAAIA team will also be taking a look to make sure that we're answering every question that you may have in this very important and timely conversation. With that, submit your questions in the Q&A section so we can make sure that they get funneled properly to the programming today. If you have any technical questions or concerns, make sure that you change the list to hosts and panelists before you send the chat so it's directed back to the NAAIA team. With that, it is now my pleasure to introduce you to Owe Agmontan, who is the chair of the Emerging Leader Committee and president of our Natural Emerging Leader Council. He is also the vice president of retail business at Sampo. So with that, Owe, please join me on the stage.
Hey, what's going on, Ashley? Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to join such a dynamic group of emerging leaders. Today, we gather to learn, grow, and shape the future of an industry that impacts us all. You are the next generation of visionaries and decision makers who will drive change, set new standards, and create lasting opportunities. Your role as emerging leaders will be critical in navigating this transformation, whether it involves adopting new technologies, addressing potential business shifts, or reimagining customer experiences. The responsibility and opportunities ahead of you are vast, and they are incredibly exciting. Insurance has always been about trust and security, but today it also requires adaptability and forward thinking. Technology, sustainability, and changing customer needs are reshaping leadership in the industry. An inclusive workforce is a powerful driver of success as we navigate current trends and opportunities. The theme for today's roundtable discussion is being the bridge, leading from the middle with influence and impact. As future decision makers, you bridge the gap between senior leadership and the teams that you manage. The lessons you've learned shape the leader you'll become. I encourage you to engage, ask bold questions, and think creatively during today's discussions. How can you harness insights from all generations to develop solutions? Together, we can build a vibrant future for our industry. So let's embrace this moment, tap into our collective knowledge, and set the stage for the great conversation. We encourage you to actively participate, drop your thoughts in the chat, share your questions in the Q&A section, and connect with fellow attendees. This is a conversation, and your voice definitely matters. And now to guide us through this important conversation, I'm pleased to introduce our moderator and my friend Bri Allen, who will lead today's discussion.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. And thank you, Owe, for that introduction. Just to kind of repeat, my name is Bri Allen. I'm a casualty broker at McGill and Partners. If you haven't heard of us, we are a startup boutique brokerage. I sit in the Chicago area and I serve on the Chicago board of NAAIA as the Emerging Leaders Chair, as well as a part of the National Emerging Leaders Council. Just as a reminder, we love to keep everybody engaged. So if you haven't, and if you want to go ahead and give yourself a little shout out, what city you're from, what NAAIA chapter you're a part of, as well as throw questions into the chat that can be answered a little bit later on in our session. I'm very excited to be here today. See, there we go, San Francisco Bay Area. We love it. We love to see it. Keep it coming. So we're excited to kick off today's Emerging Leaders Roundtable, titled Being the Bridge, Leading from the Middle with Influence and Impact. We're joined here today by two dynamic leaders who are not only making waves in the insurance industry, but also paving the way for others to rise with them. First, we have Zakiyya Reyes, the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Coordinator at Munich. Zakiyya is known for leading thoughtful, people-centered initiatives, from building internship pipelines to hosting powerful conversations through the Walking the Talk series. She's passionate about mentorship, community engagement, and helping others find their voice in the workplace. And joining her is Nesha Greenhill, a licensed claims professional with Travelers who brings a rich background in leadership, operations, and customer service. Nesha serves on the board of NAAIA's Central Virginia chapter and the National Emerging Leaders Council, along OE and myself, where she champions diversity and talent development across the industry. Please join me in welcoming Zakiyya and Nesha to the conversation. Hi, Zakiyya.
Hi, Bri.
We'll there we go.
Hello.
All right. So before we get started with our panel questions, once again, I just kind of want to do a little housekeeping. We'll try to keep this on track. We'll have both Nesha and Zakiyya answer as many questions as possible, and then we'll leave some time at the end for questions and answers. So if you have any questions, please feel free to put it in the chat. Outside of that, myself, Nesha, and Zakiyya, I'm sure that we're all available and willing to talk on LinkedIn, answer questions, things of that nature. We always love it. So before we get started, either one of you guys have anything you want to say before we jump in? Are you ready to just jump right on in?
I'm just excited to be here and to share today. Wanted to thank NAAIA National for the opportunity to be on this platform.
Wonderful. Nesha, I love your glasses. They're great. They're wonderful.
Yeah.
All right. So we can go ahead and jump right on in. So question number one. Looking back at your journey in the insurance industry, what inspired you to pursue leadership? What continues to inspire you to pursue leadership, either now or in the future? And how have cross-functional collaboration played a role in your growth? And to kind of piggy off of that, if you want to incorporate this into your answer, how can rising professionals start building strong cross-functional relationships earlier on in their careers?
Zakiyya, start.
Okay, there we go.
So inspiration to be a leader. Before I got into the insurance industry, I had seen plenty of people who had leader titles, but did not behave in the manner of leaders. And just personally, I love people. I love to see them grow and thrive and develop and find where their place is. And so I really wanted to be in a leadership position, so then I had the ability to help people and foster and help their growth and their training and their development. And I picked the specific team that I was on as my first leadership position because I knew personally the intricacies that came of being that type of claims analyst. And so then I was an expert in the knowledge, and it really opened me up to be able to really just lead them from a team and their personal development, which I think is just as important as the development of a team and the metrics and goals that we have for the company. And so then just for the side piece of emerging leaders and professionals just entering in their career, there will be times where you raise your hands for things. There will be times when you are voluntold to do things. And I would say as much as you can to just lean into those opportunities and the people that you meet along the way. It is often just as important or more important who you know, so you don't know who you're meeting who will help you get to your next spot in your career.
Wonderful. Nesha, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, so a lot of people may or may not know this about me, but insurance is actually a second career for me. Almost 10 years ago, I made a pivot that surprised me even by leaving corporate mid-level management in the hospitality industry to moving as an individual contributor in the insurance industry and stepping away from a leadership title in an industry that I knew like the back of my hand. I had to reconcile that didn't mean I was stepping away from leadership behavior. The principles still transcended industry, still transcended the disciplines that we're in. And so as I stepped into this industry, I knew that I had transferable skills and I knew that I enjoyed talent development and being in the field. So I set a goal and I knew I wanted to go into leadership
to continue that mission that I had. And I wanted to learn as much as possible from as many people as possible, being new and in my mind behind the eight ball. So I quickly learned that the two industries really weren't all that different, and both were about connecting people, emotions, and expectations. So one of the biggest assets that I built, and I would recommend to any rising professional, is to prioritize gaining insight. Just like Zakiyya was just saying, sit with anyone and everyone that will allow you. I think that it's important that we remember in this industry that we do have a common goal, and understanding what our business partners did and how what I did impacted them and vice versa made a world of difference in my own work product and also how I communicated with my peers.
That's wonderful. Nesha, I've been doing insurance. I was actually an insurance major for a bit, but similarly to you, I left a mid-level leadership role at a large brokerage firm to then become an individual contributor at this startup where it's more of a flat organization. So I really had to pivot and learn what that means, to not necessarily be in a leadership role, but still move with intention, still move in a way that I understand is impactful. So that's great. I think that's awesome, and it's really good feedback. And great way to get this started, right? So moving on and kind of building on that, on this piece of it. So both of you have a deep focus on mentorship and community involvement. Zakiyya, just from what I see all the time, I know you are, Nesha, I know personally exactly what you're involved in. And one thing that I think that has always been a fine line of tiptoeing. Of course, we're here for a reason. This is we work. A lot of us are brokers, underwriters, claim professionals, and we're always networking. But you want to make sure that these relationships that you're building don't feel like you're using people for something, particularly. So how can emerging leaders in insurance cultivate meaningful relationships that not only enhance their careers, but also contribute to the greater good of their organizations, rather that be the organizations that they work for, the people that work for them, or organizations like NAAIA?
Nesha, I'll let you take that first.
Yeah.
There you go.
You want to go ahead? Go ahead.
You go first.
I mean, I think relationships are built in small moments and not in crisis and not in, transition. So taking the time to connect with people, listen more than you speak, show genuine interest in their work and their goals. We have a good friend of the NAAIA Central Virginia chapter, Rob Youngblood, and he wrote a book called Collaboration is Currency. And it's really just important to remember in the ecosystem of whatever organization that you're a part of, that it's not just about upward mobility, but the impact and the influence also has reach laterally. And so we can't just be concerned with, oh, am I the type of person that people want to work for? But are you somebody that people want to work with? And what do you bring? And as much as, us as emerging leaders, we want to be a sponge, and you don't want to get that icky feeling like you're using someone, you have to really ask yourself, what can I also pour? Don't leave a room without letting people know who you are, but also what you can offer to a situation. It always is a two-way street, offering and seeking mentorship, offering and seeking sponsorship. Even before you get to that leadership role, I really stand by leadership starts way before the title, way before the role, way before the promotion. So even if you are on this call as an individual contributor, who are you developing into the next promotion or to even fill your spot?
Absolutely. Zakiyya?
Definitely, I want to reiterate what Nesha said about not reaching out to people in crisis, because I think that leads to you not being authentic. And whatever crisis you may be in is what's magnified in that connection. And so you want to get to know people in these calm and safe spaces. You definitely want to be pouring into others. Really show up as your true self and allow what you're passionate about to shine, because then people are really getting to know you. I think when you extend your hand behind you, and you're offering to be a mentor, or you're offering to be a sponsor, or you're doing these things on behalf of others without even anyone necessarily asking or knowing, people see that. People are watching and seeing you move. You are a leader just in your own standpoint. Even those who have no desire to one day move away from being an individual contributor, you are still leading others. And so be as much as you can your true self in these situations and these opportunities, and join things that get you connected with people outside of your day-to-day teams. That's one of the best ways to meet new people within your company, outside of your team, outside of your department, outside of your office. We work for nationwide and global companies. Make those connections outside of just your specific sphere. So you're really able to grow and develop in all the ways that you possibly can and contribute in those same ways.
Yeah, I think that's great feedback. You know, this industry, it evolves so much. You never know who's going to end up where in any situation. So, you know, ensuring that you're treating everyone that you meet with the same level of respect, with the same level of interest as if they could do something for you at that moment. Because by the time you need it, it's too late to move in that fashion. So it might take, you know, as a broker, for example, I might meet an underwriter who just started, and then 3 years later, I need them to, you know, assist me with something. So I absolutely agree with all of those sentiments that you guys you dropped here for us. So to go along with that, just like I said, things change very quickly, and it's changing very often. And we have a large talent gap that we're still dealing with that started, you know, a little bit before I got in the industry, and COVID really exacerbated it. And now we're seeing it come to fruition on all sides of the industry. So there's multiple generations in the workplace, and there's a lot of dimensions of differences in the workplace. So how do you think emerging leaders, you know, so people who are new to the industry, people who are fresh out of school, people who are still, you know, early career individuals, how do you think that emerging leaders can be a bridge between senior leadership and professionals who are earlier in their career?
So I'll say from a manager standpoint, generations that are just now entering the workplace, they have learned things and experienced things that we haven't. And so there's a lot of stigma around younger generations and not wanting to work and not wanting to do this, and a lot of stigma around older generations and what they do or do not want to do, or what's easy or difficult. And so I feel like the best way to kind of bridge that gap is to really spotlight the strengths of both. Spotlight the generation just entering the workplace for what they've done well. What project did they help you complete? You know, did they raise their hand for and get kicked off? What experienced professional do you have who is an awesome mentor, who is an awesome trainer that you can connect with someone just entering their career to really bridge that gap and break down the stigmas that we have and that we hear within the industry. And as much as we can, and encourage and invite those that are coming up who maybe haven't entered the workforce yet. Maybe they're in middle school or high school, and get them thinking about insurance. Because no one said anything about insurance to me in high school. So I could have been here years ago. And so we want to extend that invite as early as we can. Build that pipeline to get them thinking about it. So then there are more people who go to school for insurance like you did, or understand that the vast amount of majors that aren't insurance related still have a place in our industry.
Absolutely agree. Nesha, you have anything to add?
I just wanted to kind of piggyback, just being still in an individual contributor space. I think it gets easy when we're having this conversation to make it a battle of like age. And to your point, Zakiyya, I think that bridge is really about creating those pockets of spaces that you were speaking on, for empathy to thrive. Because it is changing, and it's changing fast, and change is difficult, and we're having a hard time, not just in our industry, but across the board, normalizing change. And so I think that at the end of the day, people want to be seen and heard and known, and creating that level of professional connection and impact isn't just about the big decisions or the strategies that we hear about at, you know, our year end or our year beginning meetings. And I don't think that teams necessarily resist strategy. The resistance comes from the disconnection. So really advocating for your senior leadership when you have their ear, to keep their ear and their boots on the ground is really effective. I know that at my personal claims center, quarterly, our claims center vice president has a town hall to address the hot topics and to field questions. No, we're not going to solve world peace in an hour, but it's a great way to bridge that gap, so that we can start having more effective conversations and push our innovation and our initiatives forward.
Great. No, I think that makes perfect sense. And I also think that this bridges into the next question very well. So of course, you know, Nesha, just kind of piggybacking off of what you said as an individual contributor, same here as an individual contributor that's not in a leadership position. That's a lot of people in that mid-level space right now. You're an individual contributor, or you're more, you know, mid-level manager. You're not necessarily thoroughly involved with strategy necessarily. It's an interesting space in a lot of professionals' careers. So what do you guys believe is the greatest challenge of facing mid-level professionals in our industry, and how can they turn that challenge into an opportunity for innovation or growth for themselves or the team? Nesha, you want to start with this one?
Yeah, no, I can. You know, one of the adages that I used to hate hearing as a mid-level manager, or when I had managers under me conveying something that we've talked about, is, hey, don't shoot the messenger. And I don't like that, because it's not just about being a messenger. We really have to be a translator. And sometimes the messenger's delivery is 50% of the problem with getting things taken care of. And so I think there's an opportunity to ensure that we're presenting ourselves with clarity, with credibility, and with consistency. Like you were saying, mid-level managers and leaders, we sit in a pivotal spot where we're close enough to the executive vision to understand where the organization is going, but we're also immersed in the realities and the challenges of the frontline employees. And so it's important to bring the clarity down, but also lift insights up back to those leaderships and managing up. We don't talk about that as much. And so figuring out the language of your team that makes that high-level strategy relevant to the front lines and listen to the feedback to close the communication gap, I think is important, because when they feel understood and when people feel heard, they're buying in. It impacts performance. That's how you engage or that's how you drive engagement. That's how you drive alignment. And there's a lot of juggling that comes with that, because quite frankly, there's pressures of your own performance and understanding that your performance relies on your team's results as well. But those KPIs and all those metrics and all those habits, they're all connected back to behavior, and the behavior has to be connected to purpose.
All right, Zakiyya, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, so I totally agree with everything Nesha said. As a mid-level manager, you are managing up and you are leading the people who directly report into you. There's a lot of balls in the air that you're juggling. And so I see one of the biggest issues that we have is burnout at that time. Like, how are you managing both of those ends of the spectrum? Because if you're not managing them well, then you can't pour into your team and advocate for them and support them. And you're not able to successfully manage up. And so I would say it is important to find those safe spaces within the workplace, just like you have them outside of the workplace. Have the mentor or the sponsor or the close friend that you can go to at work if you need to vent, if you need to pray, if you need to cry, if you need to ask a question like, did I do this right? Did I give that message, like Nesha said, correctly? Be open to the feedback. make sure you're taking the feedback from trusted places, from people who know what they're talking about, but be open to receiving that feedback so that you are your best self, and then you can lead as your best self. I think during the pandemic, everyone experienced a blow to their mental health. And so we've kind of moved out of kind of that space, but it's just as important. So I would say for everyone, just to make sure that you're taking care of yourself in and out of the workplace so that you're performing the best way possible.
Of course. Wonderful. Thank you both. We're coming up on the last couple of questions of just the initial panel. So just as a reminder, would love to hear, we'll see any questions in the Q&A chat box. So don't put it in the total chat box. If you have any specific questions geared towards any of the panelists, myself, or general questions, please put it in the Q&A chat box. That's the only way we'll be able to see your questions, as you can't hear. So obviously, a lot of these topics that we're touching on this panel is something that a lot of people are kind of dealing with, and it's a big driver of why we even created the Emerging Leaders Chair for individual chapters in the Emerging Leaders Council, because I did feel like there was a little gap of, that was missing for people in that range. So I'd love to pivot a little bit and talk about NAAIA as an organization, as both of you are quite involved with NAAIA's leadership initiatives. So what has been your experience with how these programs have empowered you, and how can emerging leaders leverage them for maximum impact in their careers? And I do also, before, just going in this, I'm not quite sure if, we kind of talked about this. People hear emerging leaders and they don't know exactly what that means. They're like, is that early career professionals, or, what exactly does that mean? And I just like to reiterate that ranges so greatly what that means. It's for people who are early in their career, mid-level, who are pivoting positions, not just people who are trying to be in management. There's a lot of people who very much like being individual contributors. So I think that this applies to a much broader group of people than sometimes it's let on. So as we move forward, kind of with this piece of it, I just wanted to keep that on the back of people's minds. Either one of you wanna start and speak about NAAIA's programming?
Sure, I'll start. I'll say that I had heard about NAAIA years ago, I think in 2019, in a meeting, and I was like, oh, that sounds amazing. And life was lifing at that time, and then it slipped and didn't get a reintroduction until 2022. But attending the national conference in Maryland that year was amazing. To walk into a conference and spend days there with everyone who looks like us and is supporting and uplifting. They're all insurance professionals in various different departments or working to support the insurance industry. Was an amazing feeling. And I was like, oh, do I have to go back to my day job? Can I just kind of stay here? And so that was really empowering, and a reminder that as the insurance industry grows, there is still definitely a place for us, and we are still needed in the insurance industry. And so I have leaned into that as much as I can. There's a wealth of knowledge here within NAAIA National, within the chapters, within the programming. I did the Korn Ferry leadership program, and that was really amazing and helpful. And we've all kind of talked about pivoting, and I pivoted from the business and being in claims to human resources, being the coordinator of DEI. And that program was really instrumental in helping me to complete that transition. And so as we're moving up in our career and mid-level, you really want to take advantage of everything that NAAIA has to offer to help you in your growth and development. And there are so many ways for you to also give back to NAAIA, which I think is just as important, so that we're growing the pipeline of the people who are coming into the industry behind us.
I mean, I couldn't say too much more after that. I actually learned about NAAIA on a whim. And just a quick story, and it'll make sense in a second here, but there was another member of NAAIA coming from the cohort of travelers that couldn't attend the conference, national conference in Baltimore in 2022. And I had just come out of I think a posting that I didn't get, and I was a little down. And so one of my sponsors was like, listen, so-and-so can't go to this conference. Would you be interested in going? I think that was, well, the quiet part that wasn't said out loud is that you might need a little boost right now, because I had a little shot to my ego. And, I was hesitant, I had little kids, I really want to be gone for a week. And so I get to Baltimore and my mind was blown. Like, keep in mind, this is a second career for me. And to walk into a room of, at that time, 500 Black and brown professionals who did so much more than claim and the underwriting and the things that I got to see on a regular basis, it really opened up my eyes and my understanding for how far and how wide and how vast the opportunities are in our industry. And so the leaders that NAAIA exposes us to, the information that you're exposed to, whether it's these webinars, the claims clinics, regional forums, national conference, it's been invaluable. The insight that I've gained outside of my culture of the organization that I'm a part of has allowed me to navigate other rooms with so much more confidence. So I tell that story to say, go to everything. When an opportunity presents itself, it's not just, and I believe that everything builds on each other. Things don't happen by happenstance. Go to everything. And when things come up, advocate for yourself. I know a lot of times, our organizations subsidize our membership and our attendance to these things, even when they don't. Don't rent the vision, own the vision, and you make it happen for yourself. Because these programs, to take a line from Dr. Leroy Nunnery, they're not just to check a box to say that so-and-so got to do this and we put that on our individual development, plan for the year. It's truly to move the needle, because our industry is growing, it's growing fast, and we not only need to be at the table, but at the forefront of that table, leading those initiatives and having that representation, which ultimately benefits your organization. So definitely, every opportunity that you can, make sure that you're in the place.
Absolutely agree with you 100%. People always ask me how I'm always at events, NAAIA or Youngers Professionals or APIW, whatever that means. But I think being an emerging leader or, a mid-career professional or whatever it is that you are in your career and you are trying to reach a certain level, sometimes that professional and personal development doesn't just fall in your lap from being in the office. You gotta have to take matters into your own hands. So that is what I've gotten from, being a part of NAAIA, whether it is leading initiatives, being a part of initiatives, being a part of discussions like this. It can help you get to that next level, in your career just from doing those things. So I agree. I'm a big supporter of go to everything that you can go to, what is, within your wheelhouse to be able to attend. So we are coming up on our last question of this portion of the panel. We do have a couple of questions in the Q&A. Would love to see a few more by the end of this one. So please, please, please go ahead and drop it into the chat. So last question really coming out of this piece is that leadership, of course, often requires taking risks. Can both of you share a time when you had to take a bold step in your career, and how did it impact your leadership journey or just your career journey in general?
Zakiyya, I want to hear about this jump from claims to HR.
Yeah, that I would say was definitely a risk. I mean, I love people and I just want really to see them do all the things. And so the management part of claims, not necessarily the claims part of claims, I really enjoyed. I really love to be with people. And so that conference that we went to in Baltimore and the NAAIA conference and managing the career table that we had for my company, I was like, oh, like I definitely wanted to be in human resources. And I had not completed my degree yet. I had gone to school for psychology and did 2 years before I entered the workforce when I had my daughter. And so it was a big risk to just set my sights on that and kind of pivot away from, continuing to climb the ladder in claims. There were other positions, there were opportunities for international travel, but I knew like this was my passion area. And so when the world shut down and my children didn't have all of the places that they usually needed to go, I said, I am going to take the risk and go back to school and finish my degree and really set myself up to reach that goal of transitioning to HR. And it did kind of hit a bump in the road when I first raised my hand to go back to school. And it wasn't immediately seen to people how psychology could apply to claims, and some suggestions of, oh, maybe you want to do business administration, which I did not want to do. I wanted to do psychology. And so, really continuing to just advocate for myself. And then I did have a wonderful leader who really supported and believed in me further down the road, who said, yeah, definitely go and get your degree in psychology. And there were times when I was questioning what did I get myself into and what was I actually thinking going to complete my degree with 2 little ones during the middle of the pandemic. But that, just taking that risk and that sacrifice of kind of giving up on a lot of the other things to ultimately reach that goal has been so rewarding. I get to develop the people coming up behind us and leading a high school internship, and I get to partner with our partners like NAAIA and manage those relationships. And so my outreach and my leadership is so much more vast, and it goes across the industry. It's not just within claims, but in several different generations that we have within the workplace, within all of the various offices that we have within the region. And so it was definitely a risk worth taking, and pivoting can be difficult, and we've all had different pivots, but I'd say, like, if you have your heart set on something, this is where you want to get, then, it's worth the risk. Take the time to really understand what's needed and plan it out, but then make that leap and get to where it is that you want to go.
Wonderful. That's great.
I would say for me, switching lines of business was a huge step for me. I was on a very clear leadership track within the auto line of business. I had done all the things that, I was told I needed to do to get to that management position. Went through our internal programs and things of that nature. And I got to the point where I was actually preparing to interview, auto unit manager posting came up, and I was like, this is my moment. And I had a sponsor reach out to me and say, hey, I think this is not the right idea or the best idea for right now. And I said, excuse me. And I didn't understand at the time. And looking back, it makes a lot of sense. But I took the opportunity to step back, because he talked to me a lot about developing additional technical skill. And I had a problem with that, because I did all the things, right? And so when I moved over to general liability, it wasn't as flashy and cute for me, because it didn't come necessarily with the promotion. It didn't come with the increase. It was very much so a lateral move. Mm-hmm. But what I got out of that was a supercharge to my technical skill, because I got exposed to some coverages that I otherwise wouldn't have been exposed to. And I would have ultimately, not realizing it there, because I had my goal and I knew what I wanted to do and what I was passionate about, I would have been kind of a lame duck leader, because I didn't have other things under my belt. Could I have still been effective? Yes, but it would have limited how I could pivot later on, and that's not to say that, when we get into our specialized lines of business, or we become subject matter experts, there's nothing wrong with that. But I knew that I wanted to be able to have the most full toolkit that I could have. So later down in my career, if a pivot came up, I could already say, oh, I've done this, or I have experience with that. And so I say that to say, don't be afraid to try something new or to do it scared. I was a one-trick pony over in auto and personal lines. And it was a big jump going over to the commercial space. And again, I had to do it scared, and there's still a lot of things that I don't understand. But again, my network within NAAIA, I've had to tap a couple people on their shoulders, even at forum. Like I know we're supposed to be getting charged, but I really have a question about this. Can you help me understand? And so it was a risk to not jump in the pool when I wanted to, and then not take that step. But it's turned out to work in my favor.
I love that. I absolutely love that. Like I alluded to earlier, I left a newer leadership role that I knew that I had a path up into leadership, but being at such a big shop and we lost a lot of our senior leaders, I felt that technically that it would have stunted my growth in the long term. So me moving to a startup brokerage shop after being at a very large brokerage place, I was nervous. I was concerned about what that looks like. It doesn't even look like a lateral move. It kind of looked like I was taking a step back. But what I got out of that was that those technical skills, like you said, where I've been able to see it all. I see things a lot more holistically, and I feel more prepared. To go much further than I would have seen myself previously. So that's great. And I love to kind of talk to people about that all the time, because everybody thinks everything looks linear. It does not. It never does. And you can see that all three of us have pivoted in some way, shape, or form. Very rare. It's very rare that what you start out doing is what's gonna, really get you from A to B. So I think this is such a great pivot to some of the questions that we have in the chat. Thank you guys for getting out there and putting it in there. And one of those questions, and Nesha, I think this would be a great one for you to start on. Outside of that technical aspect, of course, because we know that's going to be the most important piece. But Tori Harris asked, how do we position ourselves to let others know that we are ready to lead at a higher level, whether it's internally or externally? How do you guys feel about that?
For me, it's about raising your hand. And I say that because that sounds like a coy, like cliche answer, but I think that sometimes there is this stigma about promoting yourself or advocating for yourself that we struggle with. And I think that sometimes, even I would go as far as to say, as people of color, we struggle with doing that because sometimes we're the only one in the room. And we haven't seen anybody that looks like us do it before. But sometimes I think it's important to just simply advocate for yourself. Raise your hand. Don't wait for the cues from other people in the room to nod you or nudge you on. When you feel confident in yourself, oh, I can do that. Or when you trust your own gut and your own vision, when you see stuff and you know that you have an answer to a problem, don't be afraid to put yourself out there and say, I think I have a solution for that. And at minimum, they'll appreciate what you said. In the middle, somebody will remember what you said, and maximum outcome is that you're going to be the one to do it.
Agreed. Absolutely. Zakiyya, do you want to add thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that. The people who don't speak are not going to get fed. I think oftentimes we think if we put our heads down and we do our work, then they'll notice how great we are. And rarely, if ever, does that happen. So I totally say to raise your hand for that. I'll also say to kind of broaden your view of where you can raise your hand, because the truth is that there might not always be projects or initiatives within your specific team where you can learn or grow. So maybe you're raising your hand for leadership opportunities in NAAIA. Maybe there's an ERG or a council that you can raise your hand at. Maybe it's Toastmasters, which helps with public speaking and did wonders for my career. So just kind of broaden your view outside of your specific department or with your specific manager of where you can be raising your hand. Don't let the lack within a specific place you are kind of stunt your growth for where you could go. Your future is wide, it's open, and you want to make sure that you're keeping that view.
Absolutely agree with both of those. Could not have said it better myself, ladies. All right, so moving back to the Q&A, there are a couple of people who asked the same thing, so I think it is nice to pivot to this one next. So what are some of those key qualities or skills that you think are going to be the most important or very important to focus on for early career professionals who aspire to one day step into leadership roles?
So I will say networking is one of the biggest skills, and I wish I had started that earlier. And my mother tried to tell me, and I was like, I don't need that. I know what I'm doing. And I could have been excelling in my career so much further if I had started that earlier. And then I'll say again is the public speaking, because even if you're not necessarily speaking to a large group, everyone can benefit from developing skills in communication, whether that's one-on-one to a large group. If you're doing something like a TED Talk, the amount of times that you use a filler word or getting the nerves out or not going off on a tangent, then you use these skills to present to your team. Maybe you've raised your hand for a project, you did an awesome job, and they want to put you in front of the board. Like, are you going to be able to do that and advocate for yourself if you don't have those speaking skills? So I would say definitely those two. And then emotional intelligence, just making sure that you are going through your day in your life, being self-reflective and aware of your emotions, as well as reading the room and determining kind of what else is happening along with the people around you.
Absolutely. Nesha, anything to
It
add?
just ran through my brain and picked up all of my thoughts. I've always been a huge advocate for people developing the soft skills. Technical skills can be taught. We can teach you coverage. We can teach you how to handle a claim. Learning how to speak and how to read a room. We're in that generation of, I'm not being rude, I'm just being honest. There's a way to say everything. And so that feeds into so many different spaces, like you said, opportunities to speak in front of the power players in our organizations. Right down to, we're here talking as emerging leaders in mid-level management, how to deliver feedback. Because there's a way to say everything, and how you say it really can impact the results that you get. So I would definitely say, looping that public speaking, looping those communication skills in with emotional intelligence is super, super key.
Agreed. And if I could add one thing, I think, just as particularly from being a Black woman, in our space in broking, is to learn when to, pick and choose your battles wisely. I think that is one issue. Obviously, we're all for advocating for ourselves. We're all for sticking up for, what is right. But, you kind of turn into the boy who cried wolf, right? Everything becomes a battle. So learning, and I think that goes along with the emotional intelligence piece of it, learning how to read a room, is knowing when it is time to go to bat for something specifically and when it is time to let something go. And I think that has been one of the hardest things as a broker, has been learning when to back off, when it's time to push a little bit more, things of that nature. So I think that's been a key skill that really takes time to develop in my years in the industry so far.
And those are those things that open the door to microaggressions, open the door to, fueling the stereotypes. We're a panel of Black women. The last thing that you want to say, just because you're vocal, and I full disclosure, I had to deal with this because I'm vocal and articulate, doesn't mean that I'm difficult.
Right.
And we have to break that stigma. And sometimes it's easier to catch flies with a little bit of, honey versus a little vinegar. We've all been in those situations. And so show up in ways that they don't expect you to show up. And I think that it goes a lot further sometimes.
Agree. I always say kill them with kindness. I always get my deals done a lot more efficiently when you're understanding and when you're kind. And unfortunately, like you said, that's not necessarily what they expect out of us. So it is always refreshing. Now we're getting questions. Now we're cooking. So I'm gonna try to, and I'm gonna try to kind of pick and choose some of these out of here that I think are gonna be big, but as well as anybody here who we do not get to your questions, please feel free to add us on LinkedIn. More than willing to, answer these questions. This is a big one. I think about the work-life balance piece of it, of course. So there's a large number of emerging leaders, people who are raising families who have a lot of outside commitments outside of just work and their extracurriculars that kind of supplement work. So how do you go about establishing healthy boundaries professionally while still seeking leadership opportunities?
So
That's a tough one.
yeah, I will say that the biggest thing with setting healthy boundaries is once you set a boundary, then you have to stick to it. Because if you set it and then someone moves past that and you just kind of let it go, the message it's sending them is that this is not, a true boundary. I think it takes a lot of time for reflection to figure out what works for you. So what works for me is that when I sign off for the day, then I'm no longer an employee. So I'm not a doctor. I'm not saving lives. Like if we're friends outside of work, feel free to call or text me, but I'm not reading any emails until the next morning. And so it took me a long time to get comfortable to that place. But then when you get there, I think it's important to stick and to stay there. And that's for me. I have really close friends who they sign off early, they're done at 2 or 3, and they spend the time with their children. And then they know, and their family knows, I'm going to do 1 or 2 more hours before I go to bed. And then they're good. So you don't want to model exactly what someone else is doing for their balance, but find out what works for you, and then share that. And then I'll say as a manager, the way that people start to feel comfortable to share their boundaries is your direct report is for you to share theirs. And so one of the things that I used to share with my claims analysts all the time was that if there's anything falling from the sky, sleet, rain, ice, snow, I'm working from home. So please feel free to go into the office and I'll be messaging you from online. And so they would laugh, but they understood that they weren't going to see me. And so then there are other people who have felt comfortable coming to me to share, their boundaries, like, oh, my son has such and such games as this times on Friday, and I'd love to be able to have the bulk of my hours Monday through Thursday so that I can make these. And so as much as you're creating those boundaries, it lets other people know that that's okay for them to do as well. It's going to be scary the first time you do it. And I had to step away and do some deep breathing when I first started out doing that, but then you get used to it, you get into practice and it becomes easier to do.
Thank you. And Nesha, I'm so sorry. We are running low on time because great people were very asking questions like we wanted them to. So I just wanted to go ahead and pivot so people can get back their time. And we have one final question here for both of you that I think will be a great takeaway for the folks in the audience today. So if you are entering the insurance industry today, what leadership mindset do you think is important to develop early on to succeed long term? Nesha, since I cut you off there, you want to go ahead and give us your thoughts?
Yeah, somebody in the chat said we save PDFs and not lives, and that tickled me. But anyway, for me, servant leadership, it's important. Leading with humility, leading with transparency, leading with integrity builds trust with your teams, and it trickles down. What you pour into your team trickles down from them to your customers, your insureds, your policyholders, even your claimants. for those in the claim space. Servant leaders, I feel like, encourage open dialogue and value diverse perspectives and promote inclusion and inclusive decision making as well. So my tagline has always been prioritize people over performance, and your people will prioritize their performance.
That's great. That's awesome. Zakiyya, anything else you want to add?
I love it. I think that was the time for you to kind of read what's in my brain, Nesha. So I'm going to pivot a little bit and just share something that I feel like is really important, that the titles, manager, director, AVP, those are not what make you a leader. So you could be a people manager and not be a leader. So as you go into and come into this industry, I want you to have the mindset of a leader. You are an influencer. You are modeling the behaviors that you want other people to see. And you can do that with the title of assistant, associate, analyst, specialist, whatever title that is that you have, a leader will be added on to that. So don't be afraid to speak out. Don't question why you're in rooms or spaces if everyone else has a different title. Show up as your authentic self. Remember who you are and what you bring to the table, and then bring it to the table and give them a reason to remember you in the future.
Wonderful. Great taglines, right? At the end of those statements, I think that's great takeaways for people in this room to be able to kind of sum up what they've been hearing this past hour. Well, we're going to go ahead and close this out. Thank you all so much for being a part of today's conversation. This space was created with you all in mind to remind you that leadership isn't just about having a title or waiting your turn. It's about showing up with intention, building real connections, and being the steady voice in the room when change is needed most. To our incredible panelists, Zakiyya and Nesha, thank you so much for your honesty, your insight, and for showing us what it looks like to lead with heart, with purpose, and from wherever you stand. For those of you navigating the middle, whether that be leading teams, building bridges in your network, or trying to figure out the next step, remember that your voice does truly matter. You don't need permission to lead. You just need the courage to keep going, to stay curious, and to lift others as you climb. We hope you leave today with something you can use, an idea to act on, a relationship to nurture, or even just a new way of seeing your role in the industry. Keep showing up, keep building the future you want to be a part of, and keep NAAIA in mind and make sure that you're making it to your local events as well as your national events. Thanks again for joining us, and I'll pass it on to Ashley to talk about some of our next programming. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for the pass, Bri. Zakiyya, Nesha, also thank you for those gems. I was taking a ton of notes. I seen the chat just running with all of the gems that you had, from collaboration is currency, intention with your building relationships, not just building when in crisis, to behavior connected to purpose, just to name a few that seem to resonate with the group. And so we are just so very grateful to have your expertise inside of this space. And to the audience, thank you so much for joining us today. We truly appreciate not only your attendance, but also the insights that you shared in the chat. We also take notes of that. As many of you will be connecting via LinkedIn. We've seen those pops up, and we want to make sure that you continue inside of these conversations. 2025 is becoming a banner year for NAAIA as we continue to just making sure that you have the information you need to be empowered and stay connected to this particular industry. With that, we have additional programming that's still coming up.
Thank you for watching this flashback episode of NAAIA. We appreciate your time and hope you found the insights valuable. Stay tuned for more enriching content. Until next time, thank you for being a part of the NAAIA community.